Hilchos Chagigah Perek Shlishi, the laws of celebrating festivals, chapter 3. Once again, we say Moadim L'Simcha, Gut Mayid, Happy Sukkos. Still couldn't get ourselves into the sukkah for today's class. There's just too many events, Baruch Hashem, going on in the Chabad sukkah. So we just figured we'd stay here, and probably the same is going to be for the rest of Chol HaMoed. We're just going to stay here in the shul and continue to learn Rambam over here. Today, on Sukkos, we're learning another chapter that's unique to Sukkos. The subject of today's chapter is Hakel, the special mitzvah that happened once every 7 years, where all the Jewish people, men, women, and children, would come to the temple, listen to the king, read the Torah. This would happen on the second day of Sukkot every 7 years. 2 years ago, 5783, was a Hakel year. We still keep count. The Rebbe loved the concept of Hakel. He turned the whole year into a Hakel year. He would say Hakel is not just a day, it's the entire year. The message of the entire year is Jewish unity, and as we're going to see today, Jewish strengthening of identity and convictions and belief in our religion. And there's just so much commentary from the Rebbe on this chapter of Rambam. I probably won't be able to communicate even half of it, but just know this is a subject that the Rebbe loved, the idea of bringing Jews together. And it's a mitzvah in the Torah once every 7 years to do this, and we hope for the time that once again it'll be a physical mitzvah as we'll go to the temple and be able to do this as a nation united together with Mashiach. But in the meantime, we learn about it, and by learning about it, it's as if we're doing it. Says the Rambam Malacha Aleph, mitzvah saseh. It's a positive commandment, lehakhil kol Yisrael, to gather all the Jewish people, anoshim v'noshim v'taf, men, women, and children, b'chol moitzoi shmita, ba'alei sam l'regel. On every year following the sabbatical year, when they first come up to the holiday. Or what's the first holiday that we come to the temple for after a year ends? Is Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, of course, they're also holidays, but the first time you have a mitzvah to come to the temple is Sukkot. So the year after the sabbatical year, on the Sukkot, there's a mitzvah to gather the Jews in. Now the Hebrew word lehakhil has a connotation of causative. Somebody has to gather them in. Either the high court or the king himself. It's actually their mitzvah to be the one to cause everyone to gather. Of course, once the mitzvah applies to every single Jew, so it also becomes our mitzvah as well. There is a personal obligation for every man, woman, and child to appear in the temple, but ideally, or in its prime form, the mitzvah is on the person or the entity that can cause everyone to gather. And what do we do when we're gathered? We're supposed to read in their ears. In other words, everyone has to listen as we read from the Torah, parshiyos, specific passages, shehin mizarzois oisam b'mitzvahs, that make us more attentive and quick and fill us with alacrity to do mitzvahs. And strengthen our hands in the true religion. Very unique expression. We don't find this really anywhere, das ha'emes. That's the mitzvah. The Rambam doesn't usually give many details in the first halacha when he initially describes a mitzvah. Why is he going into the whole thing over here? We're supposed to read portions that make us scrupulous in doing mitzvahs. So the Rebbe would always explain that Hakel, that's what Hakel is. Hakel is recreating the experience at Sinai, as we'll soon see later in this chapter, and that itself gives us strength in our identity as Jews. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is not to gather, and the result is to feel good about our Judaism. The mitzvah is in the gathering to feel great about our Judaism, in the gathering to study and engage in a process that makes us stronger in Yiddishkeit. And so the Rambam, he puts it in the defining line, because that's the definition of the mitzvah. The definition of the mitzvah is to go through an experience that makes you stronger as a Jew. Shenemar, and the source for this is, it says in the Torah, Miketz Sheva Shonim, B'moyei Shnas HaShmita, B'chag HaSukkos. At the end of 7 years, on the holiday following the Shemitah year, on Sukkos, B'voy Kol Yisrael Leirois, when all the Jews come to appear before God, Hakel Es Ha'am, you have to gather the nation, Ha'anoshim, B'hanashim, B'hataf, B'gercha, Asher B'sharecha, men, women, and children, and the converts in your gates. Some Rambams also have these words, Tikras HaTorah Azais, Neged Kol Yisrael B'azneim, where it clearly says, read this Torah in the Jewish people's ears. Point is, clear mitzvah. Hakel, gather the Jews, read the Torah, inject them with Jewish pride. Halacha beis, kol ha'poter min ha're'iyah, poter min mitzvahs hakel. Anybody who's exempt from re'iyah, the obligation we're speaking about yesterday and 2 days ago, appearing in the temple every holiday, is also exempt from hakel. Chutz, we said actually 13 people yesterday are exempt, but not all 13 are exempt. Chutz min hanashim, v'hataf, v'ha'orel. Women, children are clearly mentioned in the Torah, so they have to come, and an uncircumcised person also has to come. Aval hatame pater mitzvahs hakel, but a ritually impure person is exempt actually from hakel. Shenemar, because it says bevoi kol Yisrael v'zeh einay roi libiyah, when the Jews come and he cannot enter into the temple premises. The hadavar barer, it's obvious shahatumtum v'handregen is chayavin, that a person whose genitalia is covered and a hermaphrodite are obligated sharanesham chayavis, because here men and women are obligated. So whatever you are, a man or a woman, you got to be there. Halacha gimel emasay hayu kaidei. When would they read the Torah? This is a depiction of hakel as it used to look in the temple. When did they used to read? On the evening following the first day of Sukkot, which is the beginning of the days of Chol HaMoed. Look at this, we're in the middle of Chol HaMoed. The days of Chol HaMoed of the 8th year. Rambam uses the word moitzoi. This creates some debate if hakel is done at night, the night of the second day, or the second day itself. We'll leave it for you to engage in your own research on that. The hamelech hu sheyikra be'ozneim, and it's the king who has to read it in their ears. King is the one who reads the Torah. Ube'ezras hanashim hayu kaidin, and they would read it in the women's courtyard. The kaidei kishehu yashev. He was allowed to read sitting. But if he read standing, he's praiseworthy. As in this picture, he's standing. Where does he read from in the Torah? So he reads actually a lot. From the beginning of the 5th book of the Torah of Dvarim, ad soif parshas Shema, 1.5 full portions, the portion of Dvarim, most of Va'eschan until Shema, and Ve'ahavta. Umedaleg, then he skips about one portion, V'hayim Shemaya, to the second part of Shema, V'hayim Shemaya, which is in the portion of Ekev, the next portion. Umedaleg, then he skips also another portion, Le'aser Ta'aser, which is in the middle of Parshas Re'eh, which we're actually going to read in a couple of days on Shmini Atzeret. That's the Torah reading for Shmini Atzeret. Aser to Aser about tithing, and it has all the holidays mentioned there as well. The Kaidei me Aser to Aser al Haseder ad Soif Brachos Uklalis, and he reads basically 2 full portions, half of Re'eh, 3 full portions, Shoiftim, Kiseitze, and most of Kisavai till the end of the blessings and the curses, ad milvad habris asher karasitam b'chayrev, until the words, aside for the covenant that he made for them in Choreb at Mount Sinai, upaisek, and that's where he stops. So a big chunk of the book of Deuteronomy of the 5th book of the Torah. Halacha dalid ketzad kaidei. How would this reading come about? Says the Rambam, toikin b'chatzaitzres b'kol Yerushalayim. First of all, the Kohanim had to go out and blow trumpets. There they are, blowing their trumpets in all of Jerusalem. Kedei lahakil esa'am, to get everybody to come. Umevin b'magdayla, they brought a big platform. V'shal eitz haisa, and it was wood. Here's another depiction from a little bit of a different angle. A big wooden platform they would build. They would stand it up in the middle of the women's courtyard. And the king would go up and he could sit down on it if he wanted. All this so they could hear the reading. You have to be elevated so everyone could hear. All the Jews who came for the holiday would gather around. The Chazan HaKnesses, the temple synagogue attendant, Neitel Sefer Torah, would take the Torah scroll and give it to the head of the synagogue in the temple. The head of the synagogue would give it to the deputy Kohen Gadol, second in command. Usgan, the Kohen Gadol, the deputy, would hand it off to the actual high priest himself. The Kohen Gadol, HaMelech, and the high priest would hand it off to the king. All this process to honor the king. Show you how many levels you have to ascend to get to him. The king receives the Torah scroll, he accepts it standing. And at this point, if he wants, he can sit, but again, if he wants, he can remain standing. And like any person getting called to the Torah, he has to open up the Torah scroll, and look where he's going to read. And he makes a blessing, etc., as anybody who reads Torah in Shul would do. He reads the portions which we mentioned, till he finishes the entire thing. It's a long reading. And he rolls it up, he closes the Torah, and he makes the blessing afterwards like we do in Shul, etc. That blessing afterwards, after a Torah reading. Then he adds 7 more blessings, like actually the high priest did on Yom Kippur. Similar. They are the following. First, he exports some blessings from the Amidah. Hashem, accept with goodwill our service. Meidim, anachnu lach v'chuli, and then Ata v'chartanu mikol ha'amim v'chuli ad mekadesh Yisrael v'azmanim, the middle blessing of the holiday, Amida, kederach shem mevarchim batfila, as we do during prayer, harei shalosh brachas kemat be'an, these are 3 blessings, straight following the text of the liturgy as the sages established it. Then the Revi'us, the 4th blessing, he gets some poetic license. Mispalil al hamikdash sheyamid. He prays on his own, with his own expressions and requests for the temple that it should stand. The chaysim ba, just the ending, he has to follow a certain ending. Baruch atah Hashem hashechin b'tzion, blessed are you God, who dwells in Zion. Chamishis, the fifth blessing, mispalil al Yisrael shetamid malchusam. He davens for the Jewish people, that their kingship, monarchy should last. The chaysim ba, and he ends the blessing with the words, haboicher b'Yisrael, blessed are you Hashem, who chooses Israel. Shishis, the sixth blessing, mispalil al kohanim, sheyirtzeh hakel avedasam. He davens for the kohanim, the priests, that God should accept their service. The chaysim ba, and he ends off, Baruch atah Hashem, mekadesh hakohanim, blessed are you God, who sanctifies the kohanim. Shvi is the seventh blessing, mischanenu mispalil ba, kifim ashu yachol. It's simply a general prayer. He beseeches and he pleads God according to what he can. The chaysim ba, and he ends off with the words, Hoisha Hashem es amcha Yisrael. Hashem, save your people, your nation Israel. Sha'amcha tzrichin lehivasheh, for your nation requires salvation. Baruch atah Hashem shemiat tefillah, blessed are you God, who hears prayer. And this concludes the ceremony of Hakel. Halacha hey akriya v'habrachas b'lashon hakodesh. The reading and the blessings were all recited in biblical Hebrew. Shenemar, as it says, Tikra es haTorah hazois. You have to read this Torah. This Torah means bilshayna, in its language. Afal pi sheyesham le'azois, even though there are foreigners. Most Rambam texts end the halacha over here. Afal pi sheyesham le'azois, period. Even though there are foreigners, you have to read it in its original language. And then halacha vav begins. V'geirim she'enan makirim, converts that don't know the language. Chayavin lahachin libam, they're still obligated to focus and pay attention, to listen to what's going on, even if they don't understand it, as the Rambam will immediately detail. Just for a moment, I want to point out that although this is how most Rambam texts have the halacha split, there are other variations. Some put the words v'geirim she'enan makirim in the end of the last halacha. Whereas the Rambam is saying, Afal pi sheyesham le'azos v'geirim she'enan makirim, we read the Torah in Hebrew, even though there are foreigners and converts who don't understand. And then the following part of the halacha, chayavin, is a new halacha, applying to everyone, not only to the converts. Others actually even go further. They insert the last words of the last halacha, Afal pi sheyesham le'azos, and put it into the next halacha. Same message. Afal pi sheyesham le'azos v'geirim she'enan makirim, even though there are foreigners and converts who don't speak the language, still chayavin lahachin libam, they have to focus and pay attention for just to be part of the Hakel experience. So either way you read it, the point is that Rambam is telling every single Jew, you have to be in tune with what's going on. And what do you have to do? Start again from chayavin. Chayavin lahachin libam ulehakshiv aznam. They're obligated to set their hearts and to pay attention with their ears. Lishmaya, to listen, be'ema v'yira v'gila bir'ada, with trepidation, with fear, with joy, but also with trembling. Ki yoyim shenitna by b'Sinai, like the day that Torah was given on Sinai. Here's where you see, Hakel is a recreation of the Sinai experience. Afilu chachamim gedolim sheyodim kol haTorah kula. Even the greatest of sages, who know the whole Torah backwards and forwards. Chayavim lishmaya bekavana gedela yisera, they have to listen with great and extra intention. Umisha eina yachal lishmaya, even if somebody cannot hear, he's too far, right? It's a massive gathering over here, the whole Hakel, everyone's there. No mics. You can't hear, you're too far. Doesn't matter. Focus your heart. Just be present. Because the only reason Torah made this obligation to read the Torah here is not to hear some reading, it's to strengthen the true religion. And that you can still have even if you can't hear the words. You're in the presence of thousands and thousands of Jews. Men, women, and children are all together. Everyone is here, like we were at Mount Sinai. In fact, the Rambam continues, V'yira atzmai ki'ilu ata nitztava. You have to see yourself as though right now you're being commanded with the Torah. Hashem is coming down and giving you the Torah right now, as if you're hearing it from God Himself. Because the king is only an agent. Just an agent to let you hear the words of God. He's a conduit. He's a vehicle. Really, it's like you're hearing it on Mount Sinai itself. And again, the Rebbe has so many sweet and beautiful interpretations here, and every single word of the Rambam here is exact. Can't really get into everything right now, but I advise you to look in the Sichas. It's mamish amazing things. The point being, again, the general point being, that Hakel is in and of itself not just there to achieve later results, but it is a maimed, it is a occasion of strengthening Jewish pride. Halacha Zayin, the Rambam concludes, Yom Hakel Shechali is b'Shabbos. If the day of Hakel came out on Shabbos, can happen today, but in the times before the calendar was set up, Sukkot could begin on a Friday, second day would be on Shabbos, Shabbos, we push it off to Sunday. The Rambam actually picks the reasons. He says because of the trumpet blowing that the Kohanim had to do, and the pleading expressions of prayer, which we don't do on Shabbos, those don't override the Shabbos, so we didn't do the whole Hakel. Commentaries raise a major issue. There's actually the platform has to be constructed. Shouldn't that be the main reason why you don't push off Shabbos? So the commentaries explain, and the Rebbe also mentions once that according to the Rambam, no. The platform isn't an issue. Make it before Shabbos. Set it up before. The only reason we push it off from Shabbos is because of the trumpets and the prayers. We don't want to say those on Shabbos because Shabbos is a day of joy. We want to leave that out. So in that case, Hakel is pushed from Shabbos to Sunday. Blessed is Hashem who grants us assistance. Mazel tov for concluding the laws of Chagigah, celebrating festivals.